Welcome to Elon Beyond the Bricks, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes of Elon University to explore the stories, ideas, and innovations shaping our community. Each episode will talk to individuals who are making a difference in the world and explore the values and experiences that make Elon so special. We hope you'll find stories that inspire and challenge you, and perhaps even spark new ideas of your own. Join us as we dive into conversations that go beyond the classroom and into the lives of our remarkable students, alumni, parents, faculty, and staff. Thanks for joining.
Hello and welcome to Elon Beyond the Bricks. I'm your host, President Connie Book, and today we're thrilled to welcome Elon parent, trustee, board chair, and my boss, Dave Porter, to the show. Dave is the owner and managing partner of Baystate Financial. And under his leadership, that company has grown from a single office in Boston to 16 locations across New England and expanded from 49 advisors to more than a team of 300. One of the things about Dave and his wife, Jen, they are proud parents of two Elon alumni, Tim and Jack, and they've been some of Elon's greatest champions and supporters. As chair of Elon's board of trustees and then other significant contributions that we're going to be talking about today, which include the Porter Family Professional Development Center in the Love School of Business, which has been a game changer at Elon. One of Dave's philosophies that I love is he's got this phrase, doing well by doing good, and I'm going to ask him to explain that to us. Also, just to know about Dave, I mean, he really has brought philanthropy and thinking of others to Baystate Financial. He and the company were recently recognized by the Boston Business Journal about just the distinguished work that they've done in philanthropy at Baystate. He also, in addition to Elon, I love the fact that he was chair of Zoo New England. He was also on the board there and then took full command of that board. And so when he became the chair at Elon, I teased him that it's like a zoo. It's a lot like a zoo. But so he's taken some of that skill set and just done a lot of good for children generally. And young adults and thinking about ways to support young adults and children as they aspire to goals in their lives. So one of the fun facts about Dave is that he's also a huge Bruce Springsteen fan. And so he's often teaching us some of the lyrics or the songs that make a difference. So Dave and Jen have 5 children together and 2 grandchildren that they are proud parents and grandparents of. So he's got a full life. So welcome, Dave. I'm excited to have a conversation with you.
Thank you, Connie. Looking forward to this.
Thanks for making the time for it. Now, one of the things I've always been impressed with is your leadership style. And you've had lots of different roles, business, nonprofits. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the key attributes that you bring as a leader? Like what's on your mind in leadership as you take on these different roles and lead at Baystate?
Sure. Well, great question. I think I use the phrase often emotional reciprocity. And when I enter into a relationship, enter into a conversation, enter into a business agreement, I always do it with the idea that I know that person extremely well. So to get to the end result of anything, you can't set expectations without having a relationship with somebody. So what I always try to do is prioritize the relationship before I worry what the outcome is going to be. And that often leads to steps along the way and momentum towards whatever we're trying to achieve together. And it's interesting because when I look back on many different business dealings and friendships and all that, I've become friends with so many people that I've entered into business agreements with or served on boards with and things like that. So there's, it can't be said enough. There's something always good about people, and it's for you to go find out what's good in that person and really understand that person.
You know, we talk a lot about relationships at Elon, and I think for students, part of it is teaching them how to begin relationships and how to develop relationships. So, can you give us a little bit of tactical advice about initial approach? Like, how do you start building a relationship?
I was at a relatively serious business dinner the other night in Boston, and this young man has built an incredible company, and he's 37 years old. And I shared with him that I've watched what has happened with the company, and I've admired it. And I was, really honored to be having dinner with him that night. They're looking for additional investors. And I said to him, just share the journey with me from the creation of the idea to where we are today. What were the big steps and little steps along the way that enabled you to have the success you have today? And, in looking at that, what would you have done differently if you could go back in time? And
no, that's good.
At that point, just be quiet. I know in my early years, I probably wasn't the one being quiet in that conversation. And, maturity tends to creep into being 63 years old. It just allows them to talk. Let them talk about that, because people love to talk about themselves and love to share what that journey's been of their success. And I think that when you hear that, they've now told you what the magic pill is to really get to know them better.
Yeah, that's a good, and it reminds me of being curious, right? I'm going to share with the audience that one day I was saying to Dave about a new person that had assumed a new role. And he said, well, why don't you write them a letter and ask them if they'll meet you for breakfast or for coffee? And to be honest, I had not thought of that direct of an approach, just write, and I like the fact you suggested a letter versus an email, something that's going to make an impression. So tell me where you learned about doing that, the power of doing that.
When I was 25 years old, I met a gentleman by the name of Tom Quirk. At the time, I was in the Philadelphia suburbs in the early stages of my business career. And when I met Tom, he taught me things not so much on the business level, but on the personal level. How to dress right, how to speak right, how to engage people in conversations and all that. And there is nobody who had more of a profound effect on me than he did to get me where I am today. And sadly, he passed away a couple of years ago. But our relationship, when I joined his company in 1986, I left him in 1992. He passed away 3 years ago. We did not go 1 week without talking. And I moved away to Washington, D.C., and then have spent the last 28 years in Boston. And we talked every week. And he would always just, how can I be helpful? And that.
That's funny, because I was going to ask you about the initial approach. And then my follow-up was, well, and then once you've made that, how do you continue to have, deepen those relationships?
Yeah. And the other thing I've always done, I've had two crazy experiences. The craziest experience is I write notes. So if I read an interesting article in a magazine, I write a handwritten note to the author of that article. And Sam Walton, who at the time was the richest man in the world in 1993, wrote an article about employees and the definition of employees and how to treat people at work. I wrote him a note. 4 months later, I got a call from Bentonville, Arkansas. Woman on the other end of the phone had the deepest Southern accent I've ever heard. And she was Mr. Walton's scheduling assistant. And he wanted to have lunch with me at the Mayflower Hotel in Washington, D.C., and I spent 2 hours with him. So here I am as somebody who grew up with little to nothing, and now, because of a handwritten note, I'm having lunch with the wealthiest man in America. And he taught me a great thing, which I carried on since that day. He asked me if I knew the definition of an employee, and I said, I think so, but share with me if you will. And he said it's a task-oriented individual with no ownership in their future. Nobody wants to be called an employee. We forbid that word in our company because everybody has ownership in their future. The second thing he told me, he said, do you like music? And I said, I do. And he said, what kind? And I said, I grew up in New Jersey, went to school outside Philadelphia. I'm a big Bruce Springsteen fan. I said, how about you? He said, the sound of cash registers. because in the old days,
yeah, they used to make noise. Now they're digital, but
right, exactly. So
I remember when the cash drawer would open, and make that noise.
I'll never forget that meeting with him.
Yeah, that's a great story. Now, you mentioned that you grew up under different circumstances than you live in now. Can you tell us just a little bit about how you grew up? And
sure.
I'm curious. Yeah.
I had great parents. I have an older brother and sister, and great family. Yeah. But, sadly, my dad did not keep a job for more than 6 or 7 months at a time and was chronically unemployed and always wanted to find a quicker way to find money, do things and all that. And he passed in 1996. And I would often have a conversation with my mom about, why did he do this and what happened with this? And she remembers having $1.25 in the checking account. And that's all the money they had to their name at one point. And that's a very difficult way to live life. And she did an amazing job with what the circumstances she had. And my brother and sister feel the same exact way. And it taught me not to have any debt in life. So, if you can't afford it and pay cash for it, don't get it. So
really important lesson. I know, and sometimes it's the hardest circumstance that teaches you the hardest lesson, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'm curious about your employment trajectory. So tell us a little bit about how you got to Baystate, the journey
Sure.
there.
I had the great experience to be a White House intern in college. So I was an intern for President Reagan for 2 summers, and I had an opportunity to go back as an associate in the White House. I would have been the assistant to the 15th assistant for the head of the U.S. Customs Service and I was offered $13,100 a year. I went to a career night. I was wearing shorts and a T-shirt and flip-flops while my fraternity brothers were in blue suits and white shirts and red ties, and it was a career night. And I met the gentleman from Prudential, and he said, give it a shot, and, told me all the reasons. And I thought, I'll do this for a year. If Reagan wins again in 84, I'll go back to Washington. But if he were to lose, everybody's out of a job. So I don't want to be out of a job. So I think I'll take the opportunity with Prudential. They hired 12 people, 11 quit in the first 6 months. I was the sole survivor. I actually thought it was fun to knock on people's door and ask them about their life insurance. I met great people, had a lot of fun doing it. And that put me on a journey to stay in the financial services business, ultimately transitioning the firm that I've had for 28 years in Boston to be more wealth management. So managing people's money and financial planning.
Would you say that was the boldest move that you made? Like when you think about these crossroads that we encounter in life, talk about that moment and that decision.
Sure. The 2 big moves I made in my life, I moved from Philadelphia to Washington in 1992 when I bought a small firm. And, to uproot your family and tell your 8-year-old daughter she's leaving her friends and your 6-year-old son. And, that's pretty traumatic in their lives. So they did amazing with it and moved to Washington. And then 4 years later, had the opportunity to live where I wanted to live, which was in New England, particularly in Boston, and buy a firm there. And, you measure risk in different ways, but ultimately, I just put it on a piece of paper, what's the upside and what's the downside. And obviously you have to factor in, if you have a family, how does that impact the family? Not just, I knew I'd always be okay, but you got to put your family first.
So tell me about that phrase, doing well by doing good. So
Sure.
Where did that come from? And I've heard you say it before to group, so I want the audience to have an opportunity to hear it.
Yeah. I briefly mentioned how I grew up. And even though I grew up under different circumstances than a lot of people, I did have an opportunity to work in Newark, New Jersey when I was younger in a soup kitchen. So I got to see what the real difficult part of life was with people who truly had nothing. And I think it put me on a path to say, how can I change somebody's life? And that's really the theme of our organization today, is we change people's lives. So I heard a great idea and I instituted it with my own children. They got allowance like a lot of kids and had chores and did stuff. And a third of the allowance would go to whatever they wanted to spend it on at that moment. A third would go into savings and a third would go to a charity. So literally, if they got a $9 allowance, that $3 was going to a charity. And, we'd save it and then make a donation, I get up to $50 or so. But the point is that I always find people who have done extremely well. And I was at a dinner last night with 5 of my dearest friends in the world and their wives, and we were at dinner for a long time. And every one of them is wildly successful for many reasons, and every one of them is philanthropic. Everyone changes lives. And I think birds of a feather kind of flock together, and that's who we are. But, as an organization, we want to be recognized in the communities in which we have a thriving business as somebody that not only has a thriving business, but also is giving back to that community. And there's a million ways to do it. We just did an analysis. We did 47 different charity events in 2024 as a company. So everything from packing backpacks for children back in August who were going to go to school, and the only thing they had was what was in that backpack, to preparing Thanksgiving dinners. It just really runs the gamut.
And I know that those moments, just from my own experience, like when you're side by side with a workmate and you're doing something for someone else, and someone else's success, it really is a powerful bonding that happens with the team to work together to impact somebody else's life.
Yeah, exactly.
I think a lot in our work in higher education. So tell me about, I remember because I was at Elon when you were on the business school advisory board and made the decision to invest in the professional development of Elon students. Can you tell me a little bit about your thinking, what was going on? I know you had Tim and then later at that time, and then later Jack would come to Elon. So tell me about getting involved with Elon and what prompted that.
I'm not sure at what age young people are the most impressionable, but I think it's the 18 to 22. I think they're learning, they're on their own, they're learning how to manage their time, their friendships, other relationships, etc. And what I've seen time and time again is sometimes a steady hand leading that student down a path of what's going to happen to you. It's interesting. If you think about our life, I was born in 1961. When I pass away, there's going to be a dash, and then it's going to be the year that I passed away. My entire life is in that dash. I'm taking a small piece of 18 to 22-year-olds of that dash and saying, we can change your life. We can help you. How do you interview in a business? How do you shake hands? How do you greet people in a business environment? Well, you're waiting to be interviewed. It's a nervous, anxious time. So what I saw at Elon was the business school was up and coming. The goal was to get it in the top 50 in the United States, which it clearly is now. And one of the things that was missing was kind of a resource, a business center, a career center, which would allow employers to recognize that Elon was serious about hiring business majors. And at the same time, students had a place to go to get help with their resume, with their interviewing skills and all that. And I think that's something that if you don't have the opportunity elsewhere, Elon is providing that for you. And it makes the university that much better.
And it is true. So the Porter Center probably, we have about 2,000 business majors now, and the Porter Center stays busy. And one of the powerful things about naming a center is that we say the person's name. It becomes part of our culture. And so they'll ask each other, have you been to the Porter Center? Have you, and so they say that name, and it's become associated with professional success, the ownership of professional success. I like 18 to 22-year-olds too, so we have that in common. So it is a powerful thing when you think about philanthropy connecting ways that it connects people to outcomes that may have not been possible before. And if you think about the hundreds of interns that are flowing through, and I know you've had interns at Baystate.
A lot.
So so I believe in the power of an Elon education, that it results in a type of graduate. So have you experienced, tell me about the Elon interns you've had.
We've had some great Elon interns. And one of the things that I mentioned, I had been an intern in college in the White House. And the first thing that my boss said to me was, there will be no filing and no photocopying. You were going to learn politics. And boy, did I learn. And I have the same philosophy with the interns in our office. There's no filing. There's no photocopying. When they leave that internship at the end of 9 to 11 weeks, they understand what financial planning is. They understand the stock market. They understand insurance. They understand everything. And it puts them on a pathway that if they want to be in the wealth management business, they've gotten a nice head start. The Elon interns I find are different. I think it's in Boston. There are some schools which the students feel a little bit entitled. I've joked with a couple of them. I said, would you like to go directly to my chair? Because if you want to, you can have all my issues for the day. Okay. And they're like, no, I don't want that. We do a contest at the end of the internship, and this is really self-serving to me. So let's say we have 24 interns. They pair off in teams of 2. So we have competition of 12 teams, and they have to come up with an idea that Baystate is not doing currently that they think we should do. So they've had 9 to 11 weeks to experience the organization. They've met with a couple hundred people probably, and now they have an opportunity to be the chief. And they get to say, this is what Baystate should be doing. The Elon kids shine unbelievably well. And it all goes back to the classes they took, which are very hands-on. They're understanding business metrics, business models, and all that. I don't see that in all the internships. And the good news is the winning team, each student gets $1,000 on the spot in cash. So they like to walk home that night with that $1,000 in their pocket. So
yeah, that's
it's
good.
Very, very competitive. So, what I always say to the Harvard kids is just because you couldn't get into Elon doesn't mean you don't have to try in this competition. So,
that's good, Dave. That's good. I bet that teaches, part of what you're talking about is, this world that's mediated. So you're not having as much face-to-face contact, right? That people are on their phones, on their screens. And what I like about Elon's model, it forces more face-to-face contact. It's residential, it's experiential. One of my peers, the president at the University of Virginia, Jim Ryan, he's written a book called Wait, What? And that's the title. And it's about this idea that today's generation has their head down and they're on their phones. And then somebody is saying something important to them and they only hear the last 3 words. And then they look up and go, wait, what? And you don't want to miss all the rest of the stuff, right? And because there's so much good in that. So that's really good to hear. Now, I want to ask you a couple questions because being a board chair of a university right now is not that easy of a job. It has been a tumultuous season for higher education. So I want to just get your thoughts about higher education, universities, and this fondness you have for the 18 to 22-year-old.
Yeah, in 2011, when I joined the board, I truly joined with the idea that I want to make a difference. I want to help, but I need to sit back and learn because it was foreign to me what was happening and what I was hearing. And I would tell you, no matter what age you join a board, ask a whole bunch of questions, not in the meeting, but do your homework outside the meeting so that when you go to the meeting, you're fully prepared to interact and understand what's happening. And, that's what happened. And I got to learn the impact that higher education has on these students, the difference between 18 to 22-year-olds that have an opportunity to go to college and those that don't, and what that means for a long-term future. And Elon University in particular really measured student success. Everything centered on engaged learning, student success. We didn't go 10 minutes without hearing those words, and we still don't. And so if the customer of Elon University is that student. And I don't think it's done that way at a lot of other universities. And I have friends who sit on boards at colleges and universities, and we have spirited discussions And I find myself on occasion explaining what Elon is doing and them shaking their heads like, we don't do that. I don't care if it's class size. I don't care if it's a professor who texts you if you missed a class, if you need help outside the classroom. It's just, I took the time to sit in on classes and really learn what was going on. And just an amazing experience these kids are having at Elon.
To say, Dave, you've been a great sounding board because we together have dealt just during your chairmanship, the complete disruption of college athletics, the name, image, and likeness, and then just the upcoming settlement in athletics, and then the financial aid debacle. We were still had tailwinds from COVID when you arrived, and have just been a great sounding board, particularly for me personally, too, on the strategy front, how to keep moving Elon's strategic plan forward and recognizing opportunities and how to reach for those opportunities. So it's been a great resource to me.
Connie, is there any discussion at all about name, image, and likeness for board members at all? Anything?
Yeah, that's right. Could you get in on that?
Yeah. I can't dunk a basketball or run a 10-second 100-yard dash, but I can sit in the board meetings.
Well, you often, you had told me one time about waking up with gratitude on your mind, and so I'm just going to say, I know that you and Jen and your family, I just am grateful and just love seeing Tim has his first baby now, and then Jack on his way with professionally, and just seeing the impact of Elon through your eyes, it really inspires me too in the work I do.
Well, thank you. I'm lucky to be affiliated with the university and be there at a time when you're the president.
Thanks. So that is all we have today. I want to thank everybody for joining us for this great conversation with Elon Parent and managing partner at Baystate Financial, Dave Porter. So it's been another great time at Elon Beyond the Bricks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Elon Beyond the Bricks. Please subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode, and leave a review to help others discover the conversations that matter. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.